Good morning, everyone. So today you and I are going to talk about web programming versus desktop programming. Let's get into it. So a lot of people, I assume, is going to ask, especially the juniors out there. I suppose that the seniors should be fairly in line on this one, but the juniors may not. So I get the question quite often, Fredrik, what type of programming language should I get into? What's a good bet? What can I study in order to become a programmer? Now, let's define the three main types of programmers we have out there in the world. At least from my perspective, this is an extreme oversimplification of this, but in general, when people talk about programmers, they're going to talk about one of three types of people. You have a web programmer. In other words, you primarily work on the internet, like with the internet. Basically, you make web pages, web servers, that sort of thing. Then you have mobile developers, as you can imagine, people who work in Android or iOS and so forth and so forth. And then finally, you have desktop developers, which are the type of people who make desktop applications primarily. So, when we're talking about web and desktop and mobile in essence, generally, now this is don't kill me if you don't agree, but in general I can tell you that it goes like this. The most common type of programmer job there is web. Web is by far and large the most common place you will find people looking to employ programmers, basically. Hands down. Mobile is right now growing and basically becoming the trend is shifting a little bit. It's still a lot of debate going on, and there's a battle basically going on between the web and mobile developers right now. If you have heard about progressive web applications and all of that good stuff that Google is pushing, trust me, they're not pushing this just because it's fun. They're pushing this because they are fighting it out with the native mobile app developers, because you see companies such as Google have a large vested interest in keeping people on the web. Go figure, right? So right now that's where the battle is happening. But when it comes to desktop developers, it used to be the case that desktop applications were the biggest thing around. If you go back, like say 10-15 years, something like that, desktop developers were in extremely high demand, because a lot of the applications, and still a lot of applications, are desktop specific. And you know, when I define a desktop application, I mean basically you install something on your desktop or your app, your MacBook or whatever. That's a desktop application to me. So in the discussion between web and desktop, there is, I think, no real battle to be had here, or discussion about it. Desktop is not as popular as web in terms of job availability. It is much more likely that you will find a job working as a web programmer. It's actually very rare that you find people who are looking for desktop specific developers, or that they have a product that is desktop specific, because most businesses are on the web. Everybody has a web presence, but when it comes to desktop, it's a more specific type of use case. Now, it's not bad. I'll talk about the pros and the cons between the two, which I think is very often underappreciated. And we'll also, just because I'm a nerd, a gamer specifically, we'll talk about computer games as well, and some things that I think is pretty cool to consider when you're talking about these sorts of things. Now, what are the pros and the cons? So let's talk about web. I argue that the reason why the web is so much more popular than desktop is because it's so easy to access. It has a lot of ease of accessibility. The curve, like for a beginner, it's it's a lot easier to get started with CSS, HTML and so forth, in my opinion, and get something up on the web than it is to learn all of the stuff that is desktop specific. Another thing is that it's universal. You can run the web on any platform. You cannot do that for a desktop application in general. Now, there are technologies out there. Don't kill me. I know. Just relax, sit down again. There are technologies that will let you run on any platform, such as what is it, Electron, for example, which is absolutely amazing. There are others, of course, as well, but that's my favorite one. And although that's the case, in general, I will argue that this is why the web is so popular. Ease of access, and it's universal. Then we have desktop applications. Now, if you wanted to create a computer game 5-10 years ago and have it not absolutely suck, you needed it to be on a desktop device. Like mobile games were not really worth mentioning, because the devices we were running things on weren't all that powerful, even though they were pretty powerful, not enough to do graphics rendering. And now with WebGL and WebAssembly and stuff like that, the web is actually trying to earn ground in the graphics rendering department as well. But desktop is still the heavyweight champion, and it's kind of, it makes sense if you think about it. If you want to access like something like a graphics card or something like, and really leverage that technology, what better way to do it than to actually run things on a desktop computer with the native APIs? That's the closest thing in terms of distance and performance and and basically overhead stuff in between that you're going to get. It's the most performant way to run something on a system, like in general, right? Now, that's the way that I think about desktop applications. Desktop applications gives you the most amount of power that you can provide to the user. Now, it used to be the case, and it still is, the industries that work in desktop, they have a battle that the web doesn't have, and this is a business type of perspective. Now, what's good about web is that as a web platform, you control your own company secrets. Think about that. All the logic and all the value a user gets from using your system, you are in control of. And this is, from a business perspective, very valuable, because if, let's say that you provide a service and you want to get paid for that service, desktop users or desktop applications have the problem that people actually now have downloaded basically their code. And if the code is on, even though it may not be the case for your grandma, she may not know how to do this, there are tech-savvy people or hackers that actually can get that source code, exploit it, and give it away for free. And all of a sudden you lost your business model. And it happens. And it sucks when it does, because the company can't survive if everybody's getting it for free, unfortunately. So like games, for example, that's very popular. Cracking games and like giving, pirated games and so forth. It's like it's a very difficult problem that the gaming industry is trying to solve somehow. The web don't really have this problem, because every time you go to a web page, you're being served content that is like secured on the company's servers. I mean, that's the value, like that. For the company, they are secure in that, if they have users using their system, they don't have to worry about it being like pirated or stolen or anything like that, because the user can't really get any value from their service without actually interacting with their system. So they are in full control. Desktop developers and desktop applications, not so much. They have to figure that out. So for them, the problem is that they need to find, and I think that is the issue basically. There's two main issues that desktop is facing right now, and that's the big one. Figuring out how to not get your software stolen. That has been the problem for them for the last 10 years easily. The second thing is that we are approaching a point where web is getting more and more performant, and with progressive web applications and things of this nature coming around the corner, and WebAssembly, there is a big chance, not a risk or whatever you want to call it, that desktop will have a less and less important role in terms of on the other leg it has to stand on, which is performance. Because think about it, even if it's the most performant thing, that doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't a sweet spot for the other technologies. The thing is that you get to a point where performance doesn't matter anymore. If it's performant enough, if a human can't make a distinction between a web application and a native application, then why would you use a native application? Even if it on paper is faster, if the experience is equal, then it doesn't really matter. So I would tell you this: if you are interested in games development or anything like that, then you should go desktop. It's still one of the best places to work when you're doing things such as games development. If you're just looking for a job and you want to just get this programming thing and you want to get paid to do programming, going into web technologies will be a safer bet, because the amount of work available is going to be larger. And those are my 2 cents on these matters.